Hi, my name is Diane Horwitz, and the Moraine story that I want to tell is the story of the Returning Women's Program. I came here in 1970, just 3 years after the college was founded, and I began as just a part-time instructor in sociology and then was hired as a full-time, I think it was assistant professor in sociology in 1971. So for the first couple of years when I was teaching, I began to observe in my classes, and other faculty said this as well, an increasing number of what we called non-traditional-aged adult women, women in their 30s, 40s, even 50s. And I learned at the time this was part of a national trend of so many adult women students, non-traditional age, coming to college. In fact, I found in a research report these old statistics from 1974 where a third of Moraine Valley students were over 25 and over 55% of them were over 35, and the vast majority were women. So who were these adult women that we began seeing in our classes, and why were they coming to Moraine Valley? Well, some of them had been to college before, but life intervened, their experiences changed, some got married, began raising a family, and so left college. Others, most of them I would say, were coming to college for the very first time. I remember some women who had dropped out of high school, came here for their GEDs, their general equivalents, diplomas, and continued on to college. So many of these women were homemakers, they were stay-at-home moms. Others worked part-time, there were some that worked full-time. And if I remember, a lot of the women were in service work, waitressing, clerical work, some factory work. And it was, for any young women that were watching this was a totally different time in the 1970s. Young women, particularly women coming from working class families, middle class families, were not really expected to go to college. But it was also a time in the early middle 70s of just tremendous changes in the society, tremendous changes in the culture, with really the beginning of different societal expectations for women. So it was in the air, and I think that is what propelled some women to decide to come to school after all these years. For some women, there were changing family situations. The divorce rate was rising. We began to see the rise of single-parent households as well. In other families, because of economic conditions, it was difficult to raise a family on just one wage earner. So many women felt the pressure to become wage earners as well, and so coming to school to learn job skills or to enhance their job skills for mobility. And and I'm talking about this period 71 to 74 or so, I began talking to a lot of these women, of course, in my classes, and other faculty did as well. And we saw a tremendous amount of concerns and anxieties about coming to college, and things like, I haven't read anything except a newspaper for 10 years. Writing, maybe a shopping list. I haven't taken a test for 20 years. One very common thing was, how am I going to sit in a class with all these smart 18-year-olds? I'm never, ever going to be able to keep up. Some were concerned, honestly, about what their families were going to think as they moved out of traditional roles. They weren't going to be home maybe to cook dinner every night. They had homework to do, other responsibilities. So that, too, was a concern. Interestingly, a lot of these anxieties that they had expressed to us were really contraindicated by many of the faculty, because we saw these students as incredibly disciplined, very serious, among our most active and engaged learners. So somewhere around 1974, I got this wild idea of saying, there's so many of these women coming to Moraine, what if we developed a program which was a cohort where women could learn together in an intellectually challenging environment but in a community with other women and with a lot of support. So I got together with Bonnie Henry, who was a counselor at the time, and we developed a proposal for the Returning Women's Program, and I'm going to talk about that in a second. I just want to say that one of my influences in doing this is that I was actually a participant in the growing women's movement of the times. As I said before, things were changing. It was the late 60s, it was the early 70s. So I had the experience of being in groups of women which were incredibly intellectually challenging and also provided this personal support. So we wrote up a proposal. Don't remember who we gave it to. There were other women faculty that thought it was great. But to be honest, it was 1974, and it was met, I would say, by some, from skepticism to, in a few cases, really negativity. But we persisted, and we got the college to say, okay, let's try it for a semester. And so we started the program in 1975, and I have here a picture of 7 or 8 women from the original class of about 25 or 30, and this was a picture taken 25 years after they entered Moraine Valley at a reunion that we had in 2000. There they all were, and I'll talk more about the reunion later. So what was this program? How did it work? A group of women, it was the first academic semester. They came together 3 mornings a week with 3 linked and complementary classes. And the classes were Communications 101, a standard English, freshman English class, Sociology 101, which is the class that I took, and a class taught by a counselor. And at the time we called it Human Potentials, because there was this thing going on in the 70s called the Human Potentials movement. It soon changed to Psych 100, and I think by the end of, at least when I left, I think we had began to call it a college success course. How is it connected and complementary? Well, for example, when women wrote essays or did research projects, written research reports for the comm class, very often the topics that they wrote about were taken from the sociology classes or sometimes the psychology classes. So gender roles and changing societal expectations was a theme that ran through all of the courses. And I think for most of the women, this was the first time that they were kind of aware of and exposed to sort of a systematic academic exploration of these issues. The 3 women faculty worked very closely together. We were consciously saw ourselves as mentors of the women in the program. The psych class, or college success, was really the glue, I think, that held the program together. And it would meet every Friday morning, and it was here that women got a lot of personal support, talking about how their week went, their anxieties about performance and test taking that they came to college with. The course, very often there were test-taking tips. The class sometimes broke down into even smaller study groups, and a whole variety of supports were built right into the program. And a lot of these supports were things available to other community college students, but they had to go search them out. We brought them right into the program. Definitely childcare, and a lot of people took advantage for their preschoolers of our childcare center, academic advising, personal counseling, as well as other support services. So that's the shorthand version of the program. And actually, this is an aside, searching in my basement 17 years after I retired, I found a whole bunch of materials from the Returning Women's Program, and I've just donated them to the college archive. So people want more details about how the program worked, they can check them out in the college archives. But I do have, for an example, this is just one of the brochures. You can see this, that was out in the counseling area. All the counselors had it, so as an adult woman came to school, we would say, hey, we have this program. Are you interested in it? This is very ancient. I have no idea what year it's from. So, what happened, at least in the 25 years that I was affiliated with the program until 2000, when I retired, what was the impact? So I'm biased, but I thought there was a lot of enthusiasm. We offered this cohort, this learning community, as it came to be known, every semester. Soon there was a demand for an evening section for women who worked full-time, so we began an evening program which met just 2 nights a week, because that's a lot to give up, and that was the COM 101 class and the college success or psych class. About 13 or 14 faculty throughout those years that I was there were associated with the program. Some just maybe teaching once, and then there were some like me who just did it all the time. And here is another picture of about 10 of us that was also taken at that reunion where people came back to celebrate each other. So by the time I retired, there were over, remember, 1,400 women who had gone through this program. And in the archives, I found a list of every single person that had gone through, which will now be in the college archives. Pretty amazing. So this is really a very small percentage of the adult women population that came to Moraine, but yet I think it had some significance. So I know of at least 2 research reports, which are in the archives, that were done on this program, and it looked at a variety of things. But 2 of the things that I know are very important to the college were retention rates, that is, the number of people who stuck it out, came back the next semester, or who continued on, as well as graduation rates. And I don't have the statistics in front of me, but you can find them, that the women in this program had just incredibly high retention rates and much higher graduation rates than the average adult student, and for that matter, for the average student at Moraine Valley. So that's some of the objective, data. But I also have a lot of much more, what I want to say, subjective views from women who had gone through the program and what it meant by them. So back to the reunion. This is a memory book that was done for the reunion. We have about 150 responses, and people were asked, what's your favorite memory? What was the impact on you of this program? And what are you doing now? And I'm just going to read a few of them. I'll pick out a few. So I gained confidence in my ability and self-esteem, grew closer to my children because of a common experience. We both had school and homework, and I found a place where I wanted to remain and to work. It created a safe, caring environment to ease my transition back to school, and now it allows me to do some possibility thinking about my future education. It taught me to take risk, and this one I like. The program enabled me to begin to return to college at a time that the only writing I did was my grocery list. It was a nurturing environment with women close to my age during an era when married women did not go to college. How nice that cliche is no longer a part of our culture. So if any young women are watching this, it's like, what? Married women didn't go to college? But that was definitely a notion that a lot of these women kind of grew up with. It helped me know I could do whatever I needed to do or wanted to accomplish. The learning experience has enriched my life with new opportunities and beliefs. It got me over my fear of returning to college at an older age. Also, it made me feel like more than a mother and wife, and I could go on. But you kind of get the sense of from looking at some of these, and this is going to go in the archives also if you want to read 150 of them. So I want to say something else about the subjective impact of the program, and that is, somewhere in the early 90s, I decided to do some research, subjective qualitative research, about women who had gone through the program. So I interviewed in depth quite a number of women and also organized 2 focus groups of 2 classes who had been particularly interesting and inspiring to me. I remember one was a class from 1989, and I prepared a whole list of research questions, all the way from, like, why did you come to college through this program, and other questions as well. And from these in-depth interviews from many, many women, I began writing about it and speaking at conferences, and other faculty did as well. And this is sort of academic, but I'm just going to go over about 3 or 4 themes or elements of the program that came through these narratives of the women that I had interviewed. So here goes. 1, the program provided a sense of safety and security. And so here's some quotes. I began school with a like-minded group. We were all in the same boat. It felt like a self-contained classroom. I think she was thinking about a 2nd grade classroom where the kids stay together all the time, take all the same classes with the same teacher. One woman thought it sounded comfy. We'd be holding hands as she read the brochure announcing or advertising the program. And this is very conscious, to create a climate of acceptance and nurturance. And so while it was a highly challenging academic experience, intellectual experience, it did provide a personalized and very supportive learning experience. A second element that went through these interviews, and I called it affiliation and connection. So this sounds like a joke. One woman said, I felt like it was a cross between a Girl Scout camp and a slumber party. And for me, that kind of evoked, young women before they hit teenagerhood, somewhere around 10 or 11 years old, when they're very connected to other girls. And we consciously developed, as I said, small study groups, mentoring, very strong connections between faculty and students, this connection. A third thing is a tremendous respect for adult women's lives, their experiences, and their multiple roles, and an acknowledgement of the rich experience that women who came back to school at 40, 50, and so forth had gone through. And I'm sure this was true, obviously true of other faculty toward adult students and adult women students. This is a very conscious sort of focus of the program. And lastly, I think I mentioned that for many women it was their first experience of trying to understand gender roles, the role of women in the systematic academic environment. And one woman said, "Now I know the names of everything I have lived through." I still remember this, I don't know how many, 20 years later. And what is that about? And so I called it a naming process as consciousness of societal expectations for women began to be understood, and they began to recognize the social character, the social nature of their common experiences. And just a couple more things, and then I want to talk about our big reunion in 2000. But around I'd say the middle 90s to 2000 or so, there began to be a trend in higher education, particularly at community colleges, of what was called learning communities. And I know that I gave a talk once about our returning women's program is a learning community, even though we didn't call it that. Paula Ducey, who was a counselor who worked with me in the psych class, just recently retired a few years ago, also gave talks at conferences. And so I just kind of Googled Moraine Valley Community College the other day, and there we are, up there as references. And it did receive national attention. In fact, there was a kind of consortium it was at I think it was the University of Washington, that looked into our program and was very interested. And so we started this, in 74, 75, the forerunner to a lot of these other learning community programs, and I still have a strong belief in it. So I'm going to end by talking about 25 years later, this reunion we had at Moraine. About 150 people came. I showed you a picture from the first class of 1975, and we had a photographer, and we would call out, "Fall, 1976," and 2 women or 3 women would come up, and there's a picture of every single class, whether it's 1 woman or 10 women, and they are now going in the archives. Did I show you this, the picture of the faculty? But if you can see it, you notice there was 1 man there over all the years. And I just want to give a special shout out to Randy DeVillis, who taught the COM 101 class in the evening and who has now passed away, but was beloved. And he's mentioned in quite a few of these women in the memory book. At that time, here's the brochure of the reunion, and even got a special mention in the Chicago Tribune. They used to have a section called Women News, and there was this great columnist that some people might remember, Barbara Brotman, and she wrote a really nice article, "The Semester That Changed 1,000 Lives," and she interviewed a couple of the people. So, almost in closing, I'm going to read from the brochure, and this is something that a couple of the women who were on the planning committee was some faculty who had been involved. Forgot to mention, I know of at least a dozen women who went through the program, finished their AA degree, and then got jobs at Moraine Valley. So some of them were on the committee, some were returning women, and they wrote this really beautiful thing that I'm going to share from the brochure. So, the Returning Women's Program began in 1975, organized to provide both a nurturing and challenging experience for adult women students. Now we're gathered together 25 years later to celebrate the over 1,000 women who chose to begin college through the program. For most of us, this was a turning point in our lives, a chance to look at where we had been and where we were going. Being with other like-minded women helped us with our journey. We found support and connection, a discovery that we could write, read, and master challenging material. The program gave us study groups, tips for test taking, and for some of us, lifelong friends. The journey after our semester in the program took us down different roads, discovering newfound interests, pursuing different career paths. Many of us went on to finish our studies at Moraine, while some of us completed our bachelor's degree as well. But no matter where we are today, we remember fondly our initial worries and fears, our determination to overcome obstacles to our success, the gradual realization of our capabilities, and our feeling of pride in our accomplishments. We celebrate the power of education to change women's lives. So, my last comments, are that working in this program for the 25 years was one of the most joyous teaching experiences of my life, and choking up as I talk about this. Wow. And I want to thank Moraine Valley for letting us persist and going along with our proposal in 1974 and giving us, myself, the opportunity to be part of this program.